Welcome to the life you crave. Simple and sustainable weight loss for women who have better things to do than diet. I'm your host, Leah Pinelli. I help ambitious, badass women stop overeating, overworking, and overgiving to lose weight from a place of love. I'll help you simplify weight loss, end your overwhelm, and create the life you crave. If you like what you hear, please like and subscribe to this podcast. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome to the Life You Crave podcast. I am so thrilled to get to introduce you all today to one of the most inspirational women that I think we've had on the podcast. Dr. Cindy Tsai is an award-winning, board-certified physician, TEDx speaker, best-selling author, and wellness life coach, taking an integrative mind, body, spirit approach, helping accomplished women create alignment to live a healthy and meaningful life with ease. As a leader, physician, and patient herself, she saw and experienced the impact of chronic stress on the body and was compelled to do more than prescribe medications as a Band-Aid. Through her own healing journey, she explored and trained in a wide range of modalities and transitioned to entrepreneurship to make a bigger impact, taking an integrative approach to wellness. Dr. Tsai believes that everyone deserves to enjoy the life they worked hard for, and it's time to say yes to yourself and more. Welcome, Dr. Cindy. Thank you so much for coming on The Life You Crave.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm so excited to chat.
Me too. So I just want to let my listeners know that Dr. Cindy and I were talking before we hit record, and we could have just gone on and on and on. And she's like, I think you should hit record, because I was like, you're absolutely right. So Dr. Cindy and I have a lot in common when it comes to what we are passionate about and what drives us. And so I'm so excited to dive in today. But first, Dr. Cindy, do you want to just share with us your story? Like, how did you get to become Dr. Cindy, the health and wellness coach?
Absolutely. So ever since I was young, I wanted to become a doctor because I thought that was the best way to help people.
Yeah.
And I was actually very health conscious ever since I was young. I would be drinking water instead of juice as a kid. Okay?
Oh, I love that.
And of course, loved science and the human body. And so I worked super hard going to all the top schools, Johns Hopkins, Dartmouth, like checked off all the boxes.
Oh, girl.
And, went straight through all my training and everything looked good, especially on the surface.
Mm-hmm.
And one day when I was going through residency training, I actually woke up not being able to see, which was terrifying. And I talked about this in my TEDx talk.
Yes.
Where, the whole room was dark and blurry, and I was just like trying to diagnose myself and stay calm.
Right. Yeah, right. Like, what were you thinking at the time? What was going through your head?
I kept rubbing my eyes. I was like, this must be a dream, like this can't be happening. And then, going to different doctors and having them say that, the labs were okay. The labs looked fine. But I wasn't fine. My prescription increased 3-fold overnight.
Wow.
And, and in that moment for the doctor to look at me and to say, this is interesting. Being on the other side as a patient, it was, I felt all the emotions. And it was terrifying. I felt helpless and all the things. And I think that, a few days, a week later, other symptoms came up and all the things. So I was diagnosed finally. I had a diagnosis. I had an autoimmune condition impacting my eyes that could have led to full blindness.
Oh my gosh.
And it's like a rare, like 1 in a million type of condition, right? Like something you never even think about. And so of course I started on the serious medications like steroids, immunosuppressants, I wanted to get better. But I also gave myself permission to pause, to think about like, okay, what's actually going on? Because I had always been so health conscious,
Yeah.
and trying to take care of myself and doing the self-care and all the things. And then with autoimmune conditions, as you may be familiar, a lot of times, so it's when there's a lot of inflammation in your body. And so I had to ask myself and just be honest, like, where was this inflammation coming from?
Yes.
And a big part of the answer was stress. I was in residency training. I was working night shifts. And during the day, instead of sleeping and resting, I was still raising my hand, right? Doing all the other things. I was drinking caffeine to stay awake, to get through my day, and then get so anxious and worked up that I wouldn't be able to fall asleep, right? Because I had such a busy mind. I was like, oh, I still didn't do this. I still have to do this, like ongoing, nonstop.
Yeah.
And so it really was in my own healing journey, recognizing that we need to take that integrative approach, looking at the mind, the body, the spirit, and all the things together, assembling a team, people who want to look at the root cause, who are there to support you. And thankfully was able to heal my vision.
Wow.
And so that was in residency training like 10 years back. And, I finished training. I wanted to help and decided to start my primary care practice and really enjoyed it. And, just loved helping patients understand and really learn to advocate for themselves, and build that long-term relationship. But I think what I saw was that I really wanted to do more than just prescribe medications as a Band-Aid. And I think a lot of times there are limitations with primary care in some ways and things like that. And coaching helped me so much personally that I was like, I have to become a coach.
Yeah.
And, I have to help other women who are experiencing these things and to know that there's a way out, right?
Yes.
We talked a lot about just really reinventing ourselves and how you have to give yourself permission to do that.
Okay, we have to talk about that because this is such a big topic among my listeners and my clients alike, which is, Dr. Cindy and I both have kind of a similar history in that we both invested tons of time and energy in top schools. And we both invested tons of time and energy into careers that we, earned through attending those schools and doing well. And then there was this moment, I had this moment where when I realized for me, I was overeating to kind of compensate for the feelings of dissatisfaction in my career and other dissatisfaction as well. But so then when I learned to stop overeating, I was left with my feelings of dissatisfaction, right? And now instead of feeling stuffed and bloated and all the things and then beating myself up for overeating, when I stopped overeating, I was like, oh, wait, I actually have a desire to overeat because I really I'm exhausted. I'm so stressed. This isn't as fulfilling as I thought. This is way more demanding than I want it to be. The payoff isn't as high as I thought, and so when I figured that out, I was really left with, as we started to talk about before we hit record, so let's talk about it now. I was really hit with this sense of like total shame that I wanted to change. I wanted to reinvent myself. I was called to life coaching. I had learned about it because actually through work, I had first gone to life coach training because I wanted to give more to my students. I wanted to help them navigate their lives better because I was that teacher that all the kids would come and kind of tell their personal stuff to, which I really loved to be that person. But I also was like, I don't know how to help you navigate your life. Like, just dump him. He sounds like a loser. You're so much better than that. Like, that was my advice, right? But really what they needed was a set of tools to help them make the best decisions, which we don't get trained for in our master's programs to become educators. And so I had to go find those tools. I found it in life coaching. And then I was like, oh my God, I'm obsessed with this. I love this. Similar to you, because I then got coaching myself and it was some of the most powerful work I ever did. But again, I was still really saddled with shame for years. I was hiding. I wouldn't tell people that about this newfound passion of mine because I was embarrassed because, as I always would say, people who graduate from Stanford don't become life coaches. So how did you reconcile, you're a medical doctor and you're like, I think I might become a coach. How did that work for you?
Yeah, it's so interesting because I think for me, we were talking previous to the recording, in my family, no one's an entrepreneur. And so a lot of this was brand new to me. I was always so focused on being a physician. I never explored anything in business. And so, when I made the decision, it's like learning everything like entrepreneurship, business, marketing, sales, all of it. But I think what I really credit coaching for is this sense of belief and confidence in yourself, knowing that I'm responsible and I can figure it out.
Yes.
And I think that's such an empowering place to be.
Yes.
Especially as women, right?
Yes.
Because I think we often, across cultures, generations, we've really received so much messaging and conditioning about this so-called ideal, right? Which is really unrealistic and
totally.
unhealthy.
Yeah.
And I think for me, a lot of my journey is, having been a perfectionist for the longest time. And I grew up in Taiwan, traditional Chinese culture, very much, like checking off the boxes, being a good girl. Like I get all of that.
Yeah.
And, having to do so much work myself in my own journey and healing to get to a point where I am so much more comfortable with who I am and so much more aligned. And it just feels so much better.
And you just so I'm clear, you credit your experience with coaching with arriving where you are now. Is that right? Like that feeling of being so much more clear and confident.
Yeah. I mean, I think definitely coaching helped a lot, having different coaches, different programs, different modalities, different tools.
Yes.
And I think coaching is this, it's very broad. There's so much in coaching. And I think depending on who you've talked to, interacted with, I totally get there's a whole mixed bag of, reactions towards coaching. But I think that a lot of the work I've done is through working with different coaches that has helped me really be able to transform in many ways.
Yes, I love that. So I'm so curious, what was your family's response when you said, I'm going to go off and become an entrepreneur instead of, kind of not abandon your medical practice, but stop practicing essentially in the same way that you had prepared to practice?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that definitely there was a lot of shock,
Yeah.
especially my parents. My dad was a surgeon, all of that. And so I think they very much had, this path that they had laid out, right, for their daughter.
Yeah.
And, I think that for sure in the beginning, a lot of confusion, right? And but I'm very grateful because they have been willing and open-minded to really still support me in terms of like seeing and staying connected, right? And now I think having done this, couple years, and they're like, you're so much happier.
Yeah.
And I think at the end of the day, that's really what it's about, right? It's like when you're really aligned and doing what you love and what you're meant to do, it's so much easier. Okay. You're so much happier. Like all the things improve. And so I think that's, recognizing that in the beginning, there's definitely going to be some, just like ups and downs. And the people who have always been around you may not understand.
Yeah.
They love you, but they love the version of you that they know.
Right. Right.
And when you're about to go do something completely different, it creates stress for them because
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
what are you doing?
Right. I don't know where to place you. I don't know if you're safe anymore. I don't know
Exactly.
if I have to worry about it.
Yeah. And I think for me, I mean, being a physician is definitely something I love and enjoy, and exploring different ways to serve in that capacity. But I think it's just since really becoming an entrepreneur and stepping into this whole new realm and world, it's really opened up my eyes to the possibilities and using a different part of my brain, which I love.
Yes. So, yeah. Me too. So what would you say is the thing that most of your clients come to you for? Like, how do you really help women to reinvent themselves?
Yeah, I think a lot of times it's really my signature program. I call it Connected. And it's an acronym because I really think a lot of times in this current world we live in, we are bombarded by so much that we've disconnected from who we really are.
Yes.
And so it's really important to pause, to really realign, to be intentional, and also to bring in that spark of wonder and joy and fun.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know that, a lot of this is, people would call this work, right? Like inner work.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes that can be off-putting for people. They're like, oh, who wants to do work?
Right. Yes, absolutely.
But I think that, for me, it's so important to be like, this is the best thing you could do, the best thing you could do to invest in yourself and to make it fun and easy and playful and like really allowing yourself to expand.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the women who come to me, they're similar in terms of like, they've checked off a lot of boxes.
Yes.
They're accomplished, they're successful, they look like they know what they're doing.
Right. Yeah.
But then there's this like voice inside, this internal conflict or struggle that like, oh my gosh, like, am I really doing what I'm meant to do?
Yes.
And just
in your practice as a coach, something we were kind of touching on earlier, have you found that a lot of times we aren't, as women, because we're so busy fulfilling the expectations that were laid out for us. And I think so, our men and non-binary folks, I'm not just saying it's just people identified as female, but for the sake of our conversation, we are so busy fulfilling that as women that we don't really recognize that it's even there. It's like under the surface. And then, for my clients, it manifests as overeating. And for me, as we talked about, it manifests in overeating everything and over drinking, but like particularly the chocolate peanut butter cups, that I would pop while I was doing the dishes that I always talk about. It manifested that way. But for other people, it manifests. And for me, sometimes it would manifest in me getting really pissed off at my husband and yelling, or for other people, it might be shopping, right? And overspending maybe, or maybe you're not even overspending, but you're shopping for things you don't even need,
and also overworking.
That's probably the biggest one. That's probably the biggest one. So have you found that it manifests that
productive? It's like, it's a good thing, right?
Yes, exactly. But really it's to our detriment.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's fascinating. That is fascinating. So I know you're really passionate about helping women to kind of find a work-life balance along that vein. How do you help them do that? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I think it's really important to have conversations around this because I think we as women, we wear so many hats and we are multi-passionate, and that's great. And I think about balance as, I know a lot of times people are like, okay, there's no such thing as balance and whatever. But I think my perspective is that you have something that will work for you. And it's really important to stay connected to that. And being so grounded in yourself that you know who you are, right? Boundaries come naturally when you know who you are, when you know what you're going to stand and not stand for,
That's right.
right? There's no question.
Yeah.
It's not about like pushing people away or saying no, right? Like seriously, like, when I work with clients, like boundaries, like, we talk about it, but then at the end of the time together, they're like, oh yeah, I don't even, it's like rolls off your back. You're not like feeling guilty. You know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah.
think that's
They're
really
so clear
to recognize that it's actually a lot of the work from within, right? Like connecting to yourself. And then I think another big piece is this idea of how, as women, and how, depending on, how and where you're raised, but we do live in a very, quote, masculine world.
Yeah.
And I think in that way, by masculine, I mean, there's like a lot of pressure and force and urgency and all of that. And I think that, yes, it's important to take action, right? You can't just like sit there and do nothing, but it's also making sure it's aligned with who you are, your feminine energy and your flow.
Yes.
And so I think for me, being a perfectionist and recognizing a lot of that was performing,
Absolutely.
and wanting to look a certain way, to be a certain way, to fit in a certain box, and all of the things.
Yeah.
And it was almost like a mask as a way to protect myself.
Yes.
Right.
It's like, don't be too female or else you won't be able to achieve what you're going to achieve.
Yeah.
So don't talk about your kids. Don't talk about your period. Don't talk about anything. Like, don't cry. Oh, don't cry.
No emotions, right? Yeah, 100%. I mean, I can just, I remember like just growing up and just being like, okay, like being made fun of when I was crying.
Yeah.
And it's like, of course that's going to harden me. I'm like determined never to cry again.
Right, of course.
Like, you know what I mean?
Of course. Yeah, of course.
So I think a lot of it is just like really integrating all parts of you, and owning all of it.
Yeah. And you know what? I love what you are saying about the feminine and masculine energy, because feminine and masculine energy, I mean, you tell me if you have a different perspective here, but from my perspective, that has nothing to do with your gender identity. So men, people who are identified as male, could certainly, I mean, it would benefit everyone if we actually just allowed for more feminine energy in the room, right? So allowing for men to actually bring that as well. It's such a disservice to all of us to be kind of so like myopic in our, what's desirable, what kind of energy is desirable in the workplace and in the business world.
Yeah, for sure. And thank you for clarifying, because I really, I always like to, when I teach this concept, it's like the energies are not based on human gender, sexual preferences, appearances. Like it's this energetic system that we hold within ourselves and our experience with others.
Yes.
And then like, think about the yin and yang, right? The light and the dark. Like think about it in that way, how we need both. And I think sometimes these energies become imbalanced with misunderstandings, judgments, like cultural messaging, like, whatever it is.
Totally.
And then that's oftentimes when we see problems, right? Like health problems, mental, emotional problems, like all the stress.
Yeah.
Because you can't just only have like, you can't have dark without light.
Yeah.
And vice versa.
Right.
And it's not like this duality of either or, but both and.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we need both. And I think we can easily say that we're definitely kind of lacking on the feminine energy end of things when it comes to the business world. At least, I mean, I think we've made great strides. I don't in any way want to diminish the work that, women of our generation and before us have done. But at the same time, there's still work to do. So I love this, Dr. Cindy. Okay, well, I want to ask you kind of as we kind of draw to a close here, I've got a couple more questions for you. And one of the questions that I have for you is, this podcast is called The Life You Crave. And you seem like a woman who has really been invested in creating the life that you crave and to really knowing yourself well enough to know how to pave a path forward in a way that feels in alignment with who it is that you are and we're meant to be in the world. Would you say that that's true? Have I characterized that pretty well?
I would say that it's an ongoing process and journey. I don't think it ever ends.
Exactly. So I think it was Earl Nightingale who says that, and I'm pretty sure I've got this quote off the top of my head, but if I'm wrong, I'll put it in the show notes. But I'm pretty sure it was Earl Nightingale who said, success, the definition of success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. Meaning, right, that it's like, it's ongoing, it's a progressive, and I love that it's a progressive realization because it's like an idea that we just kind of keep moving forward with of a worthy ideal, something that feels worthy to us. And even that ideal is worthy of us, right? And so what I'm wondering is, as kind of a final question, and then I definitely want to be sure that we tell my audience where they can find you and learn more. But what would you say, what's next for you on the horizon? And not to say that like you're somehow, moving on next, but in your progressive realization of the worthy ideal for you in your life, whether it's with your clients, with your business, with yourself spiritually, mentally, emotionally, what would you say is kind of on the horizon for you in terms of your own progression of a worthy ideal?
I think for me in this chapter, it's really creating space to receive.
Yes. So good.
And I think that it's been a culmination of so many years of hard work, of all of that so-called like more action oriented, like masculine energy, and recognizing like that's served a, that's important. It serves a purpose. There's a time and place, but also sometimes we get in our own ways. Or a lot of times we get in our own ways.
Yes, absolutely.
And so I think for me in this chapter, it's actually recognizing I really need to create space, and that pausing is so important. And I think especially in the beginning, when it's something new, recognizing that it's going to be awkward and uncomfortable. As I look at, different paths and ventures and opportunities, and I'm like, oh, that sounds like fun. And I think for me, it's really trying things on, being open and really making space and being really intentional about where I want to go.
Oh, I love that. And that's such it's a wonderful aspiration that is inspirational for others, I think especially as women, and great modeling, right? Just because I think that, and then, I don't know for sure, you would know better, but that idea of creating space and receiving very much feels like feminine energy, right? That we have really pushed out of our everyday lives. So I love that you're modeling that for us.
100%. Yeah. Feminine energy is more about the allowing, the receptivity, right? Just like pausing and, being that like nurturing, that like loving presence that we all have. Right?
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
I love that. Dr. Cindy, where can people find you and learn more about your program Connected and everything else? Where can they find out more about you?
Absolutely. Well, I would love for people to connect with me on social media. I post content regularly. My handle is at Cindy Tsai MD at LinkedIn or Instagram. And feel free to check out my website, cindytsaimd.com. I have a couple awesome free resources that I always like to offer and share.
Please.
So if anybody is interested, I think one of the keys is in this process is learning to connect to your intuition and really being able to listen to that inner guidance. And so I have a very simple 5-minute guided meditation to help you connect to your intuition that you're welcome to check out. So you can go to cindytsaimd.com/intuition.
Okay. Thank you. I will make sure that all of those links are in the show notes. But in case you are not checking my show notes, please just note that Cindy is spelled Cindy and her last name, Tsai, is Tsai. So, miss her. Thank you so much, Dr. Cindy, for coming on the show. It has been such a pleasure. And thank you so much just for sharing all of your beautiful energy with my community. I really appreciate you coming.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful, Leah.
You've been listening to The Life You Crave. I lost 30 pounds years ago without dieting, willpower, or deprivation. I'm on a mission to help other women, including you, do the same. You can book a free weight loss strategy session with me over at leahpinelli.com. That's LIAPINELLI.com. See you on our next call or on the next episode. And remember to like, subscribe, and leave a comment on iTunes.